Speaker of the Provincial Legislature, Dr. Ndukwana, MPs, MPLs, mayors and councillors, academia, traditional and religious leaders, civil society and men's formations, survivors who are with us today, distinguished guests, compatriots. Let me begin by appreciating the Free State for convening this men's Indaba during the 16 days of activism. This is not symbolic, it is a deliberate call for men to sit down together and confront what is happening in our country. Program Director, this gathering shows that men in this province are stepping forward, and for that, we thank you. In my work, I travel across South Africa, from Polokwane to Matatiel, from Lusikisiki to Mangaung. I sit in rondavels, in community halls, in churches and schools, and everywhere I go, I hear some of the most painful stories. Women whose last moments were filled with terror, children who have seen things no child should ever witness, families broken because someone they trusted chose violence over love. Across our cultures and our faith traditions, the role of men has always been clear. Scripture teaches that husbands must love their wives as Christ loved the church, with sacrifice, protection, and honor. Our cultures teach the same in their own language. A man is umkhuseli womzi, isikhonkwane somndeni, the guardian and the stabilizing pillar of the whole. Yet across South Africa, that sacred duty has been abandoned. Homes that should be sanctuaries have become dangerous places. And we must say it plainly, women are not killing themselves. The violence etched into their bodies and their memories come overwhelmingly from men. Just this past Monday in KZN, a cheating husband arrived in the early hours of the morning, having not been at home for the whole weekend. He demanded, arriving at that time, food from the wife. When the wife said, "But I'm sleeping," his response was fatally shooting him 5 times. And that wife will be buried this coming Saturday. And then he decided to kill himself. Also this morning, we woke up with the news that an abusive husband fatally shot and killed his police wife in Mpumalanga. These are the things that are happening. And therefore one Lutheran and famous Lutheran priest once said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." He said, God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. So Program Director, that is why this Ndaba matters, and it matters so much. Across the country, we are beginning to see men organizing themselves. They are doing it in churches, in workplaces, in the creative industry, in the media, in the film sector, in sports, in academic institutions, and business spaces. We see the work of the Goodman Foundation, Empower Works, and the Transforming Mentalities program led by the Department of Higher Education and Training. These are the signs of hope, proof that many men are deeply troubled by what is happening and are searching for a different way to be men. But it is not yet enough. As a matter of fact, we may as well pass many laws which are important, run many campaigns, all that is important, but that will not turn this sketch and this pandemic away. What will help us will when men themselves decide that gender-based violence must stop. Men themselves, men who are thinking being, who are social being, who are physical being, must themselves say, I am not personally going to abuse a woman, then things will change. They must say this in their homes where we are all not there. They must say it when they are with their friends. They must say it in the taxi industry, in the taverns. And let's say this, in the workplaces, both public and private, men who wear ties and suits must stop demanding sex from young girls, including interns, to secure permanent employment. Stop it. It is wrong. It is unethical. It is unprofessional. And it is abominable. It must be stopped. It is a sin. Our young children go to universities, they go to tertiary institutions to study, to come back and apply for work. Give them work. Don't make them pay with their bodies. It is wrong. Women are emotionally abused. They are called names by their own husband. They are told by their husband that you are told. Oh, I'm a woman myself. If there's one thing that I wouldn't want, is to be told by my husband that suddenly I am cold. Please, emotional abuse is gender-based violence. Financial abuse is gender-based violence. Where as a man are you spending your salary when you have a family and you have a wife? So indeed, this endeavor cannot be a once-off event. It must be a turning point. And of course, as we think this is an important endeavor, but allow me, Program Director, to say this, that just a day we celebrated the International Disability Day, and we also closed the Disability Rights Awareness Month just yesterday. And I want to bring that work directly into this man's endeavor, because gender-based violence and disability are deeply connected. During a visit to one of the provinces, we met two women whose lives reflect this link. The first woman was a woman who lost her arm in an incident of gender-based violence after being attacked and hurt by her sister's partner. In the same community, we met another woman who had been born with a disability and was later raped by her neighbor, targeted because she was less able to defend herself and less likely to be believed. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not isolated incidents. They echo what our National Gender-Based Violence Prevalence Study confirms, that women with disabilities are much more subjected to violence than women without disabilities. From the two incidents, the truth is clear. Violence can result in disability, and disability can increase vulnerability to violence, and that is why we are also prioritizing disability. Premier, Pillar 5 of our National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence is about empowerment of women. We also must empower women with disabilities. And that is why I am happy to inform you that the supported employment enterprises that are referred to as C, these are factories that we find in 8 provinces that are owned by the state, where women and persons with disabilities work. They are now exempted from the procurement policies. And therefore, I implore you to order linen and to order desks from them so that we can increase their employment. Please allow me. But also we are at 4% of their employment. Please employ them. When you appoint boards, please also consider at least one person with disability in those boards. President, under your gracious leadership, South Africa is happy to have a president like yourself. I want to thank you, Say, for your steadfast leadership in this struggle. You have consistently treated gender-based violence as a national crisis, not a seasonal campaign. Through the presidential summits, the strengthening of the National Strategic Plan, the establishment of the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund, the appointment of the Interministerial Committee, the classification of gender-based violence as a national disaster, as well as the relentless accountability, you have ensured that safety, dignity, and justice for women and children remain at the center of our national agenda. Thank you, President Ramaphosa, for championing the fight against gender-based violence and femicide. Program Director, I see you standing behind me. It is indeed my honor and privilege to invite His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, to ascend to the podium and address this men's endeavor. I thank you very much.
Free statement, let's welcome the President in our own way. Let's bring the torch, let's bring the torch. All men in the house, let's greet the President. All men in the house, the President wants to see all of you. Dumelang, Sanbonan, Abshe, Masiari,
Goeiemiddag. Charlie. Motsamaisa mosebetsi o dumedise Minister tsa rona, Minister Chikunga, o qetang ho bua hona jwale mona. A ile a mpisa hore ke tle mona ke dumedise Minister Mamloko Kubai, le Premier wa rona wa Freistata, le SABC tse a sebetsang le tsona, ke dumedise le Deputy Minister tse teng mona, le maloko a Parlamente e kgolo ya naha e ko Cape Town, le legislature ya hona mona Freistata, ke dumedise le Executive Mayor wa mona Mangaung, Councillor Gregory Ntatisi, ke dumedise le baetapele ba mekgatlo yohle ya dipolotiki ba teng mona, ke dumedise baruti ba hara rona mona, ke dumedise le maloko le baetapele ba mekgatlo ya setjhaba e teng ka hara rona, le bao ba nang le di-business tsa bona, ke ba dumedise, ke dumedise lona kaofela ba leng di-delegates tsa Men's Indaba. Ke thabile haholo ho ba mona Freistata, haholoholo ho ba kopanong ena e kgolo hakana. Ha ke soka ke ba kopanong e kgolo hakana Freistata e tletseng balemi. Ke re ha ke eme mona ke sheba, ke bona majority ya batho ba le mona ke bontate, moholo, ke bo malome, ke bahlankana. Ha ke le sheba, ke bona batho ba ikemiseditseng ka nnete ho lwantsha gender-based violence and femicide. Ke a le leboha ho ba ha lona mona ka nnete. You are here as men of our country, but also supported, correctly so, by the women of our country, because you recognize that violence against women and children is not only a pandemic. During the COVID-19, I did say that and declared that we have another pandemic, which is gender-based violence. A few days ago, we actually classified gender-based violence and femicide as a disaster. It's a national disaster. A national disaster that should make all the men in our country drop our heads in shame, drop our heads in sorrow. But I'm glad to be here because I see men who have chosen to come here to raise their heads in commitment, to raise their heads in determination to bring an end to gender-based violence. And I applaud you for that. And I thank you. You are here because you have taken a stand and you are ready to stand up and be counted as men and boys who declared that not in my name. I'd like to congratulate the provincial government for convening this men's indaba and for the absolutely outstanding organization that I have never seen in the Free State, of seeing so many people seated and listening carefully. I say thank you to the provincial government for doing so. We are meeting as South Africa and the world as we observe 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The recent crime statistics for the first 2 quarters of 25 and 26 financial year paint a worrying picture. And despite there being a drop in serious crimes around the country, contact sexual offences and attempted sexual offences have gone up. That means that more women and girls and even young boys have been victims of sexual assault, rape, and attempted rape. And as we have heard, every day across this beautiful country of ours, the safety and dignity of women and children is being undermined by the actions of violent men. Violent men who abuse our women, who abuse our sisters, our wives, our mothers, our grandmothers, and our little girls. As I've said many times in the past, gender-based violence is not a problem of women. Gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is the actions of men and about the terrible crimes that men commit against the women of our country. Some, in the name of culture and tradition, commit these crimes. In the name of proving their masculinity, commit these crimes. In the name of all forms of justifications, commit these crimes. Minister Chikunga and Minister Kuwai and Minister Tolasha, I didn't see she's here, have outlined the progress and the actions that continue to be taken to support survivors of gender-based violence. Earlier today, for example, we opened a sexual offences court for Botshabelo as part of the ongoing work to support survivors and to ensure that they get justice for the crimes that are perpetrated against them. But the reality is that we can talk the whole day. But neti asala, neti kihuri, banna arishompi basadi, banna areboda batuba basadi, reboda dikata nafe. Men must respect the women of South Africa. They are the most valuable asset that this country has. And men must stop abusing the assets of this country, which are the women of our country. So what we now need to do as men is today, as I've seen and as I've heard, pledges have been made, speeches have been made, and I particularly liked the message of Professor Molefe Motsama, And we want men like him to stand up and talk about what gender-based violence is doing to the women of our country. We want men like him to stand tall. And as we are all here today, we should all stand tall and say, not in our name, and all of us must make the same pledge that we will not raise a single finger or a single hand against the women of our country, that we will respect the women of our country, and that we will treat the women of our country with dignity, with consideration, and respect. And I'm glad that by directly engaging ourselves as men in this whole challenge of gender-based violence, we will be able to send a very clear message, even to those who are not here, even to those who may not even want to listen, even those who continue to abuse women. We are the ones who must be the evangelists and send clear messages to them and make it clear that we as the men of South Africa have decided that we will not tolerate any man who raises a hand against a woman, that we will not tolerate any man who abuses a woman, that we will not tolerate any man who rapes a woman and who murders a woman, because that is totally unacceptable to us, as it impugns on our dignity as the men of South Africa. I'm not here to criticize all men. We are here because we see the men of our country as a solution. We've heard powerful testimony of the men from the men's sector who shared their experiences. And we know that across this country, there are millions of good and decent men and boys who would never even consider abusing or hurting a woman, and that they are tired of being told that all men are a problem. You want your voices to be heard, to be respected, to be trusted by not just the women and children in your lives and in our country, but by everyone. Yet at the same time, we know that it is time for the men of this country to stop being on the sidelines, to stop being spectators. Let us not think that our silence as men does not mean our complicity. Let us not assume that by looking away as another man abuses a woman, we are not guilty too. Because this crime continues to fester in a culture of silence. What is the consequence of that silence? Children become frightened. Children regarded as normal, as one of the people who was testifying here. Women become terrified. Girlfriends become terrified. We have grieving mothers, and we have angry sons watching and also learning. So this men's indaba is a clear statement that we are no longer outsourcing the fight against gender-based violence and femicide to women who are the victims. We know that change must begin with us. Ke rona ba tlamehileng hore re bue ka gender-based violence. Ke rona ba tlamehile hore re dule re bua ka yona, so that we must send the message very clearly. The reason why we have said it's a national disaster is because we want government, all of government, to be engaged in a number of ways to try to curb gender-based violence. But in the end, it is us as the citizens of South Africa, but more importantly as the men of South Africa, who must deal with gender-based violence. We cannot outsource it to the women of our country because they are the victims. We are the ones who must act and stop gender-based violence. South Africa has a crisis we don't speak about openly enough, and one of those crises is our broken families. The vast majority of children in our country don't live with their biological fathers. This is a terrible tragedy. The presence of a father in the home is important to shaping the attitudes and the behavior of boys. And that so many young boys in South Africa today lack father figures. And this is heartbreaking. Yes, we know that not all fathers are good fathers. Yes, we know that other men, stepfathers, partners of the mothers or extended family continue to play a role in the lives of many boys. Yes, we know that the role of our history has played a terrible role in breaking up families, particularly black families. We must also acknowledge that there are many reasons why men also desert their family units. But in the end, we have to call on men that once you become a father, your job and your duty is to become the father and not to run away and not to think you are outsourcing your role as a father. Because families are built by present fathers. The fathers must always be present in the family to guide the children. Yes, we know that we face a big challenge when it comes to this, but we must also speak the truth. Many men in this country are shirking their responsibilities to their children, leaving their mothers, their grandparents, and other caregivers to struggle alone with raising them. It is said that more than 31% of men, yes, are unemployed. But even if you are unemployed, you need to continue raising and being present in the life of your children, particularly your sons. When it comes to youth unemployment rate, yes, we know that we have a huge youth unemployment rate. Young boys are increasingly dropping out of school. 4 in 10 learners are failing to finish school, and many of them are boys. Now, if fathers are present in their lives, the fathers are the ones who will take up the responsibility of making sure that these boys do not drop out of school. They will also be able to insist that these boys do not become gang members. They will also take up the responsibility of making sure that they do not fall susceptible to drugs. Now, this is a responsibility that we men must play in the lives of our young boys. And this is a role that is in many ways God-given that we must execute. Now, in the end, our dereliction of these problems of these challenges results in violence that is inbred as young people grow up. We heard from a testimony from one of my brothers who stood here and said that as he saw violence being perpetrated within the family, he thought it was normal. And that is what he grew up with. And much as he held himself back from perpetrating violence, but the abuse issue stayed in his mind, it stayed in his heart, and he had to rid himself of that. And today we are saying, men must stop abusing women. Men must respect the women of our country. That is a responsibility that we have as men to the women of our country. We must rid ourselves of this. The image that is being pushed in communities, on television, on social media, and virtually everywhere, that is that violence is growing. And we are the ones who must curb that violence. The police will never be present everywhere. The police will never be present in your bedroom. The police will never be present in your sitting room. You are the one as a man who must police yourself. And we are saying, as men, let us be present in the lives of our boys so that our boys grow up to be the good men that South Africa needs. That treating women and girls in a particular ways should show that we respect them. Relationships now these days have become a battleground. According to a survey on GBV published last year, a third of South African women say they have experienced physical violence in their lifetime, and in most of the cases have involved intimate partners. So the violence takes place between intimate partners. And that is why it is so important for us to have this type of dialogue and to talk to the men of our country. Now, these types of dialogues are important. More than 50% of women surveyed had also experienced psychological and emotional abuse. Again, in most cases, the perpetrator was someone they were in a relationship with. And most cases of femicide are committed by partners or ex-partners. Abuse does not only refer to bruises, it is broad-based. There are men and boys who have problems with alcohol and substance abuse, who terrorize their family members, their mothers and grandmothers, and they steal money and possessions for their next fix. This is another problem that we as communities must deal with. The abusers of women and children live amongst us. They are present amongst us on a daily basis. They are fathers, they are sons, they are grandfathers, they are uncles, and cousins and friends. And as you hear the stories, they are truly horrendous stories of how women are abused. And in many ways, abusing a young girl or a woman by raping her, by abusing her in other ways, is like a death sentence. And in the end, we as men also kill the women of our country. And these things aren't happening in some faraway place. They are happening in our schools, at our places of worship, at workplaces, and places of higher learning, in nightclubs and in homes. And most shamefully, when they happen, the other men look away. And quite often, the community knows. It gets to know precisely what happened. And this is the reason why we must all stand up, particularly the men in our country. We must stand up and say, not in our name, not in our country, not in our community, not around us, and we will not allow it to happen as the men of South Africa. It must stop. And today, we must be brave enough to say that whether it is physical, mental, economic, or in other forms of abuse of women, they are all abuse. And as men, we need to ask ourselves, of course, what are the deep-rooted causes and attitudes that we have towards women and girls that is fueling this type of behavior. And once we recognize them, we need to ask for help. The toxic masculinity, ke monna le tsela ka le tlamelo re mamele re la ke fihle hae bosiu mme o mosadi wa ka a robetse ka partner ya ka e robetse a tsohe as Mr. Chikunga was saying, I'm hele because ke monna gore mosadi a gona lentswe le a ka le beyang against lentswe la ka. That is toxic masculinity. And it goes against the tenets of our Constitution. Because our Constitution says we are all equal. We are all equal not only before the law, but we are equal to one another. Ahona omong omoholo ho feta omong. Ra lekana kaofela. And we must act like ra lekana. How fita la pay? O etse mmela pay gore president o itse nna le wena ra lekana. Ra lekana. Re na le ditokelo tse tshwanang. And o mo jwetse ho president o itse o tswela ka lena ditokelo tsa hao le tsa ka di a tshwana. The men of this country, yes, face a number of challenges. Challenges that are very difficult, that have to do with our past. But those challenges are not an excuse to abuse women. Our forebears, even as they faced many challenges, they did not abuse our great-great-grandmothers. They did not abuse their wives, their sisters. They did not abuse the women that they lived with. We are supposed to do that. Now, let me be clear. There is no justification whatsoever for gender-based violence. Usikewa kawana kisebezi ki ona ntwengetsa ngore ki otle mmela pele le ona ntwe ya jwana. It does not mean gore how many jwana o tlamehile o etse mosadi wa hao football or a boxing bag. Now, this man's endeavor must critically interrogate all these issues and lead the way for the country in imagining what it means to be a man in South Africa today. We need men's endeavors and organized dialogues with men and boys across the country. And I can tell you, I can say that I am almost certain, all of you who are here today should tell yourself that I should leave this hall a changed person. I should leave this hall an evangelist against gender-based violence. I should leave this hall being a man who is not tolerant for gender-based violence. Now, we have seen this happening. There is a university in our country where there was rife gender-based violence, where the male students used to abuse the female students, rape them left, right, and center, to a point where the female students were afraid to walk on campus in the evening. And some students had even been killed by their fellow students. The university leadership took it upon themselves to organize a men's dialogue on campus. They gathered the men in lecture halls and got the men to speak about the causes of gender-based violence. And they got them involved in dialogue over a number of weeks. And after that, we then brought the women in to be part of that dialogue. And it was through the dialoguing that they were able to finally see gender-based violence, the rape of women, the abuse of women being eliminated. The women then started saying, we are now able to walk around the campus at night without any fear. Now, this is what has happened in one of our university campuses. And that is why I'm calling upon all of us to get involved in men's dialogues, in dialogues right throughout the country. It is one of those things that I believe we need to do as part of getting rid of this disaster that has befallen our country. I'm calling upon the men throughout the country, throughout their various formations, their organizations. It could be a soccer club, it could be a boxing club, it could be a debating club, it could be even a political organization branch. And I'm saying, from now on, let us talk openly about gender-based violence. Let us have dialogues. It can be dialogues of 3 people. It can be dialogues of 5 people. We don't need to be 5,000 like we are here today. But I applaud you for being 5,000 men who have come together in a dialogue like this. I really applaud you. Premier, you have initiated something really good. And let this be the beginning of a process that will spread throughout the country, that we should have dialogues. Men should meet and talk about gender-based violence. And yes, talk about those men who pry on young women. Yes, talk about those men who at work do not want to recognize the ability of women and expect to be let's talk about it, because I have heard that it happens. There are men in authority. Men in authority, they operate silently. They expect women who should be recognized, promoted, and all that, not to get the promotion until they sleep with them. That too must end. Our dialogues must talk about that. And when I talk about this, if one or banana babangata, abashapi maso, abashapi maso, yalibona, imileke lishebi, saying, ufana or shapela maso hahul, ena yona, but when it happens silently, Ali shapeli maso. Ishabele Matolio. So we need, I'm calling on all the men in our country, and men who are in leadership positions, to gather a number of men to hold these dialogues. And I'm stressing it because we have seen it working. We have seen it working at a campus, at a university in our country, where gender-based violence and the rape of young women was rife. And after they held their dialogues, their men's dialogues firstly, and then they mixed it with the women, it went down and it disappeared for that time. So we need to continue to talk about this. I have said to my ministers as well that I want to hear, even in government, as leaders, that we must talk about gender-based violence. We must not keep quiet about it. We must raise this spectre, this ugly spectre of gender-based violence more publicly. I have consistently spoken about gender-based violence. And that is why during COVID, when it just raised its ugly head, we declared it for that's another pandemic. Now we've classified it as a disaster. And we are going to be coming up with measures that are going to help us deal with it. But at the same time, this is a societal problem. All of society must join hands and deal with it. And we should not only deal with it during the 16 days of activism campaign. These engagements must provide men and boys with a safe space, yes, also to be vulnerable and to be honest without being stereotyped as abusers or potential abusers. There needs to be honest and open dialogue around what the conditions are that are making men turn into monsters, turn into terrible people who abuse women, who even kill women. We need to deal with how this happens, on what support mechanisms we need to embark upon to support and help men and boys who are struggling, on counseling and other platforms, or other forms of psychological assistance or support. We need to come up with those as prevention measures as well. For the rehabilitation of gender-based violence offenders, which also need to look at that so we can break the cycle of violence once and for all. So in the end, we are calling for a very comprehensive approach to gender-based violence. It does not help the cause against gender-based violence that we are only intervening once perpetrators have already entered the criminal justice system. We need to take preventative efforts and having dialogue and raising the level of awareness and consciousness of men is a very important initiative. All of society must be part of this effort and support vulnerable men and boys who are often too ashamed to ask for help. South Africa does not need a so-called new generation. A new generation of men. It needs the men and boys of this generation to do better and to be better men and to be real men, because real men do not rape. Real men do not abuse their women. Real men, as Minister Chikunga said, love their women. They protect their women. They support their women. And they encourage their women to be better. And the other important thing, of course, that we need to remember is that even as men, we all have mothers. And many of us have sisters. And many of us have aunts. and many of us have grandmothers. We need to ask ourselves, and many of us have daughters, we need to ask ourselves whether what we do against other women in the form of abuse, assault, and rape is what we would want to see being done to our daughters, to our wives, to our mothers, and to our aunts, and so on. And the answer has to be no. And if that be the case, then you must be a real man and become the real South African man that we want to see. South Africa needs men who respect women, who are compassionate, who are accountable, and who are strong in character, not with their fists. We need men who are protectors of women, not perpetrators. We need men who are role models to other men, particularly young men, in how they engage with and treat women and girls. We need men who call out the ill treatment of women by other men and report crimes against those who rape and kill women. Men of South Africa, I call on you to stand up and be counted. Let us say resoundingly, not in our name. Let the men stand up and say, not in our name. Let me hear the men stand up and say, not in our name. And let me hear men saying, we will respect the women of South Africa. We will protect the women of South Africa. And we will respect the rights of the women of South Africa. As you are still on your feet, gender-based violence will fall when men rise. When men stand up like you are standing today, that's when gender-based violence will fall. That is how we as the men of South Africa then rise. And as we rise with our women. We love our women. We protect our women. And we all rise together because nothing can stop us. Let us all say, nothing can stop us from ending gender-based violence. Mandla. Yaleboa.